For a discussion on organizational links and how to connect the marketing ecosystem, please welcome SAP's Alicia Tillman, Indiana University's Dr. Neil Morgan, Ubuntu's Peter Shellstraight, and moderator Dr. Omar Rodriguez Vila from Emory University.
Hello. Hi, welcome. So great to be here, and I'm excited about this conversation. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Neil, for being with us today. And I'm going to jump right in and kind of give our audience a little bit of background on what we're about to talk about. And it really comes down to one thing, one of the biggest challenges of leading a modern marketing organization, which is to manage the talent network. Now, what do I mean by that? 15 years ago, we could easily think about the marketing organization as a function, a unique function, a distinct function in a company that had separate responsibilities. And here's the key, that the leader of that function had the talent that reported into them be the same of the areas that they were responsible for. So for instance, if you manage advertising, the advertising team reported into you. If you manage research, the research team reported into you. Well, fast forward 10, 15 years, and you guys know more than I do that marketing has become increasingly more complex. And not only for the issues of technology, computer science, and data science, but also for the topics of sustainability and social issues, both of which are very complex. And therefore, marketing leaders are having to rely on talent and experts that oftentimes reside outside the boundaries of their organization. And we heard this in our interviews with CMOs, that they talk about the fact that, for me to be successful, I no longer have to be good at managing my own function. I actually have to be good at managing a network. And some even went further and say, I have to take that network and give it a common sense of mission, a common sense of purpose. And when you do that, you no longer just have a network, you have a coalition. You have a growth coalition of diverse talent that both sits inside your company and oftentimes outside your organization, but is aligned on the goals that you're trying to achieve, both in terms of creating customer value as well as achieving growth for the company. And that, going from managing a function to nurturing and aligning and motivating a coalition, that's part of the challenges of managing a modern marketing organization and really the core of our conversation now. And Alicia, I wanted to start with you. You have been a very successful leader at two large and complex organizations, American Express and now at SAP. And I was curious on your reaction. First, do you agree with my proposition that we're kind of more managing a coalition today than just a function? And if so, why do you think that matters? Why should we care?
Yeah, so thank you, Omar. I mean, and you are 100% right. And if you don't recognize that managing your brand is about the management of the coalition and the communities that surround your brand, then you're not thinking about how to drive consistency like it needs to happen, so that it has the desired effect at a customer level. So think about it this way. You are right. You can often think that it's perhaps maybe just the marketing organization that's responsible for the brand and the story around your brand. But when you think about research that points to nearly 80% of all business decisions being made before a consumer has a single interaction with a brand, then you recognize that there are many more other points of influence that exist in the marketplace than the messages that you as a marketing team are sending out to your customers. So, I mean, think about the people that surround you that are not only talking about your brand, but have a big influence into decisions related to your brand. Consultants, agencies, freelancers, full-time employees, part-time employees, interns, customers, media, influencers. And influencers is a big part now of the extended marketing community that marketers look to, that have a particular level of influence in an industry, in a community, and perhaps a geography, a segment of business that you often hire to help spread the word about your brand, but they need to be managed because everybody needs to understand the story like you do. Everybody needs to understand the value of your brand like you do. Everybody needs to see the differentiation of the value that you're providing. and then how you represent that message in the respective communities that you represent, if you're one of those constituents, really, really matters. And so it's complex. It grows by the day. The amount of people and constituents that are representative of your brand, but it absolutely has to be managed, and it has to be managed to the benefit of your customer so they don't feel confused about who you are, what you stand for, and what the value is that you intend to bring to them.
Can I jump in? Sorry, no, I know I'm not supposed to, but what Alicia just said kind of sparked something in my head from remembering some of the interviews that we were doing in the work, leading to the framework. And one of the things that I heard that I kind of fundamentally disagreed with was that that using brand positioning statements as a way of getting people to align on a single kind of a message, that was no longer necessary in a digital world. And so I'm kind of interested, Alicia, from what you're saying about how do you get people to understand the brand like you do as a mechanism for getting alignment? Because it seems to me that's absolutely critical. And I don't know that during the research that we were doing on coming up with the framework, that we came across someone where we thought that's they cracked the nut on this one, right? I just don't think we came across that during the entire work. And yet it became really obvious to me and to the rest of the team that if anything, understanding the kind of the DNA of the brand, and not just the kind of the formal positioning statement, but kind of the DNA of the brand was more important now than it's ever been.
I actually think, Neil, that where the alignment and commonality occurs is somewhat at a more basic level, and how it gets interpreted through various communities is really the power in how brands are experienced. So, for example, if I say very simply, SAP is in the technology business and we help to enable companies to run at their best, right? And it's about how does technology help companies operate better? I would reach out to my community and say, well, what does that mean for you, right? So give us your story and talk about it in that context. So I would say my basic intention is just that it's small. I want you to build from that into truly what it enables you to do. So, if you're a CIO, in a manufacturing company, and I say, I want to give you technology to help you run your operation better, I want that CIO to then tell their story of what it means very specifically for them. Because experience, I think, comes in so many different forms. I think it also comes in different forms based upon where you are located in the world as well. And to me, I don't want to control that experience. I just want to help give them something that they can build an experience off of. And I actually think that's the real beauty of these talent communities and partnerships we have, is what can they make out of a very basic, maybe fundamental thing that I'm going to deliver to them.
So I love the idea of the simplicity, the rather than a 15 slide deck or whatever it is about here's the DNA.
Trying to manufacture it.
Right. Here's kind of the simplicity of it, and then interpret that in your own ways. But you have to remember, I'm British. So I always look at the glass being half empty, right? And so one thing that I would worry about if I was in your shoes is, I give this to an influencer, or I give it to someone. When would they do something with it or interpret it in a way that I would not want them repeating? So that would be my only, my guardrail kind of worry. The simplicity I love. I would get anxious about the guardrail.
But I think I heard Alicia go further beyond simplicity. What I heard her say is inspire the network to interpret your mission in a way that's relevant to them and spread it further, which is a vastly different approach to the one of the past, which was consistency. We succeed if everybody does it the same. That's the logic behind that, is the economies of scale logic, right? Like, you do the same thing, consistently, it's more efficient. That's not how you leverage the network. What I'm hearing is, no, you have to inspire this network to spread it in a way that's relevant for them. So it's economies of talent rather than economies of scale. And let me bring in Peter in the conversation, because up until this point, we're talking about the internal network, right? Like the people inside my company. But Peter, you've actually created a startup of helping companies leverage external networks. Tell us a little bit about that dynamic.
Yeah, thank you, and great being with you today. So the reason why we set up Ubuntu, and I have a background in marketing, by the way, and I set up a network where we're trying to Uberize environmental action. So we're working on environmental action, and we were frustrated with the fact that a lot of companies, despite having amazing environmental goals, when it comes to execution, it was very difficult, because they tend to go, a lot of large corporations having a lot of scale tend to go to the same kind of suppliers, same kind of partners. They write a check with a big organization, big NGO and support, but they miss out on the tremendous opportunity of the fourth industrial revolution that has given us hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs and innovators all around the world working on new technologies, new materials, and what have you. And so the biggest challenge that we're facing in this world is one of information and collaboration asymmetry, right? So the top-down is not connected to the bottom-up. The innovators don't know on which door to knock when you want to talk to a big company that can give scale, and the big companies, they don't have visibility on which are the best innovations around the world. So how do you organize that? And so we set up Ubuntu to Uberize this model. In other words, we're making it exponentially easier to find solutions. Right? And solutions can be innovations. Solutions can also be academic articles and knowledge and news, but also access to expertise. And hence, right now what we're doing is trying to make that as easy as possible and trying to link it, make those linkages as easy as possible. A lot of, and linking back to the earlier discussion, a lot of what we do is actually curation. It's not management, but it's curation, right? So how do we make sure that we have an environment where we can work together, where the data and the knowledge on the environment is highly curated in this world of post-truth, right? And that people feel that they're in a safe space, that they connect to each other and connect to knowledge that they can trust.
Mm-hmm. Peter, you're starting to get to some of the aspects, the human aspects of this network. So clearly we know that technology enables to reduce the search costs that you are discussing and facilitates companies to find talent and bring people together. But what are some of the human challenges of connecting a network of talent? Things like culture, things like mental models, things like, I study computer science, I study social science, and now I need to collaborate. Like, what are some of the challenges you guys have experienced in your work?
Well, oftentimes the challenge is actually organizational challenges. So when someone is looking for a solution to be implemented inside the company, it could be a new packaging material, for example, or a new way of looking into waste management. Oftentimes the hurdles are internal hurdles. We're working with companies that have their internal innovation pipeline, and then they're looking to us to complement with an external innovation pipeline. And so we ourselves don't feel a lot of human, let's say, hurdles, because there's a willingness to participate. There's a especially because this is obviously is environmental action. So you definitely have a purpose. So we don't see a lot of hurdles except for internal organizational hurdles. Because then once you bring innovation inside, that's where the trouble starts. And then you have to get approvals from many, many layers of organization. And so, and some companies are better than others, of course. And I say a new generation of marketers, a new generation, by the way, marketers getting more and more important on sustainability, which is a really, really good evolution. And so some of the more forward-thinking companies and people inside of companies becoming change makers inside the company, right? So it's not a top-down approach. Oftentimes it doesn't happen with what leadership needs to make sure of, that they create a culture of enablement But then you look for this change makers inside the company that can make things happen, that are connectors inside the company.
Alicia, let me move to you because I know you're a big proponent on the role of culture in enabling organization to perform well. What are your thoughts about the human side of connecting the network? What are some of the challenges and solutions?
Yeah, I mean, we like to use this phrase at SAP. I know it's been used often, but how do we create freedom within a framework? Because people want an ability to express their thoughts and build their own experiences, showcase their thinking, but they also, at the same time, want to make sure that there's a certain alignment to what it is, if you take a company, what the ultimate aspiration or goals are of that company, right? So how do I express my thinking, showcase my ideas, share my views, work to build a culture that helps to enable the aspiration or the value that my company is intending to deliver to its customers. And so you have to make sure, first and foremost, and this starts with the CEO of your company, often counseled by the CMO or head of strategy, what is our company vision? And I think vision is both that of which the value that we intend to deliver to our customers day to day, but it's also, if we achieve that value, what is the higher aspiration we look to unlock for the customers in which we serve, which then really starts to get to your ultimate purpose as a brand. And at SAP, we were founded nearly 50 years ago with a purpose to help the world run better and improve people's lives. That's our higher level aspiration that would be driven by the way in which our technology would be used to help companies run at their best. And if companies run at their best, then they have a better ability to unlock potential of ways in which they can work to change the world. And our ability to achieve that has to start with our culture. And so if you make those things very clear that I just said, and then you say to your employee base and your network of talent that surrounds that, how will you, as both an individual as well as a member of a team or as a member of a network, work to help us achieve our purpose, our vision? How will you work to deliver value to your customers? How will you work to help them unlock the potential to achieve their purpose and their greater aspirations in life? And that's where we can then have that freedom to think and innovate and collaborate and showcase the power of things like diversity in an inclusive environment and how we localize that thinking so that all geographies can feel as though they're innovating best for what matters in the locations in which they represent. And so I think I use, as I said, that notion of freedom within a framework because I think we're humans. We're wired based on needing some level of guidance, but we also expect to be able to have that freedom to express ourselves at the same time.
Oh, so can I jump on?
Yeah, go.
Because I think Alicia's got kind of one big piece of the puzzle here, which is kind of a consistent purpose. That allows people to have freedom. But I think there's a second piece of this, which is about common process and common frameworks. Right?
Yes.
So freedom is about the content of what you do. What I think I see is that an awful lot of organizations are moving to managing the process versus the content of what people do. Right? Rather than looking over people's shoulder and poking and prodding on what it is they're doing, then the question is about how are they doing it. If they're using a common set of tools, techniques, and very often actually even as important as that is common language, right? As marketing becomes more and more complex, as we build more and more kind of internal silos almost because we need the technical expertise within those silos, it becomes even more important that we have a common language and a common tool set and a common framework that people are literally speaking the same language, right? Otherwise this whole thing kind of, it almost grinds to a halt, Within the silos, you can maximize, but across the silos, without common processes, without common frameworks, without common language, then you just can't integrate things in the way that and coordinate things in the way that's necessary.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more, Neil. I think I would add a third piece into the puzzle, which if you have the common mission and then that common language. I think one of the hurdles that we heard most through our interviews was how complex it has become to clarify responsibilities. Mm-hmm. The clarity, we talked about clarity of purpose at the company level. Mm-hmm. When responsibilities are not clear, the individual lacks the clarity of purpose of why am I here? What is my job? And the moment that question gets planted in the minds and hearts, frankly, of many people, it stops their growth and it stops their contribution. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges that we have as a discipline. How do we manage this complexity in a new way? Because I don't think it's as simple as let's take a RASI model, let's agree on what functions do and move on. No, I mean, we can do that on PowerPoint in a meeting, but in the day-to-day, there needs to be a change in the way we approach how we relate to each other. And I just wanted to know your reactions to that.
And Amar, I couldn't agree more. That what is striking up till today is that with the additional freedom comes also the due diligence needed to avoid duplication of efforts. We keep on seeing over and over again that people are trying to solve the same issue in different parts of the world or in a different department and not connected to each other. Mm-hmm. And so when we think about linkages and connections and so forth, how do we make sure that there's not a duplication of effort? There's centers of excellence. There's exchange of best practices, because the future is already here. It's not well distributed yet. So inside the company, the future is already there. It's just that some people are further ahead and they're not exchanging yet the best practices.
Right, and the problem is that the old technology for how you deal with these coordination challenges, for the last 100 years, the way we've dealt with that is by having meetings. Mm-hmm. Right? But then if you were going to try and solve this problem through meetings, then you'd never do anything else other than be in meetings. I mean, the exponential increase in the need for coordination is just huge. So one of the things that I saw in a company that I work with, and to Peter's point about the future's already here, it's not evenly distributed. It's not just a question of duplication of effort, but sometimes it's about not knowing what's possible. One part of an organization not knowing what's possible or enabled by another, right? And so I had one organization where we organized kind of, I think it was bi-monthly. We would kind of showcase a piece of new technology that had come into the marketing organization over the past 2 months. But rather than just do a show and tell, we had this thing where we called a phrase I think Omar coined, which was meet to make, right? Which was we do the show and tell about here's something that we brought inside the organization. Here's something we can now do that we couldn't do before. And the brand organization would sit in the room and work with the team responsible for this new piece of technology and come up with a work product. So rather than just do a show and tell and then go, well, that's interesting, and then go back to what you were doing, you actually worked on developing something that you co-owned, you had shared ownership for, and then that actually got executed, right? And so that kind of solved the coordination plus some of this knowing what's possible, but it was around doing work as opposed to just show and tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Omar, if I may, I mean, just a couple of reactions to the statement and the question you made. Oftentimes, this need to define roles and responsibilities, while it's always, I think, a very, often part of day-to-day life, somehow it falls apart when you find yourself in a crisis at times, mm-hmm. right? So if we think of 2020, I found sort of two types of people emerge as a leader during this period. You had the crisis struck, people immediately needed to move into quarantine into most parts of the world. And so from a professional standpoint, two things happened. You had people become completely paralyzed by what was happening. They were scared. the uncertainty overwhelmed them, and they all of a sudden didn't know how to move forward in some sort of a coordinated way. Or you saw another group of people that get motivated by crisis, and they want to run towards the fire, and they want to fix it, and they want to innovate, and they want to change, right? And I found that in both situations, this sense of organizational discipline felt a bit lost on both, right? You had that one group of people who wanted to go run and do everything, and that's not right, because they were then taking over other people's work, and then you had territory issues. Or you had that other group of people who really needed guidance and very clear instruction about what you wanted them to do. And so if I go back to the early part of the discussion, and Neil had commented on it as well, this notion of having some level of governance and process is often thought of as something that slows down organizations. But if you think about the reasons for why it exists, it in fact helps to keep organizations running at their best, particularly when you find yourself in a year like 2020. And the overlying need during any of that period that always holds all of that together is the power of the person at the top. That person needs to have vision. They need to have empathy, and they need to recognize the different camps that people are operating in and what level of attention they need, so that you can work to preserve the health of your organization during periods when you need it the most. And this was one of those years. So just a couple of comments and reflections about kind of how to think about it, also in the importance of that person at the top of the organization as well.
And just to jump on on this, is what you said resonated really strongly, in the sense that the common frameworks and processes and tools is not a control mechanism. And I saw I don't know where I saw it, but I saw a quote about, the function of brakes on an automobile is not to slow it down, but to enable it to be fast. And I think exactly what you just said is exactly the same applies in terms of using these common tools and frameworks, right?
That's exactly right. And I love that analogy, right? So if you kind of sort of flip, things that appear to operate one way on its surface, and challenge yourself to think about the other very maybe opposite role that it actually plays in helping to keep you grounded and focused on the right things and the things that matter. Oftentimes that's what breaks, are there to help enable you with, believe it or not. So I think that's a beautiful analogy to think about.
Yeah. And Alicia, picking up on your question about what happens in times of crises, I think these are interesting times and unique times as a pinnacle moment to look outside again. Because whether we like it or not, on most of the topics we are dealing with, the expertise outside of our own organization is exponentially bigger, and will always be exponentially bigger and faster than the expertise inside. And hence the links, and how do you organize links to the outside world in a way that is true to yourself, true to your business strategy, true to your brand strategy and purpose, but taps into that a massive opportunity. And I'd say that this is the unique moment to do so.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Peter. I mean, you've said it so well as the leader of your organization, that and it comes down to the power of our communities, and that's what this topic is all about. It's once again, what is the role of your talent network, right? There's definitely some surface level aspects to the value it can bring, but the deeper level, the almost more meaningful one, is how does it help you be a more empathetic brand? How does it help you realize differences that you otherwise couldn't see within the four walls of your company? How does it allow you to connect your products and services better than that of what your vision is as a brand? And I do think that is the true, more deeper meaning of the power of a talent network.
And I think we're almost out of time, so I kind of recap with what Alicia said at the end. It seems like managing the customer experience is a team sport, and if you don't manage the frictions inside your organization, those frictions are going to show up in the experience of the customer with your product and eventually limit your growth. Guys, thank you so much for spending half an hour with us debating this really important topic. And Greg, back to you.